decisions like what stroller to get, what color to paint the nursery, but one of the biggest decisions they face is which birthing option is the best fit for them.
So many of us are familiar with the role of an obstetrician or a gynecologist, but what about the other options that exist? Well, here to give us some insight into the world of midwifery is the president of the Canadian Association of Midwives, Katrina Kilroy. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
I love this topic. I love this. So I had an obstetrician, gynecologist, and a doula. Cynthia, you had a midwife and a doula as well. So we're going to try to figure out who does what exactly. So the basics, the differences between an OBGYN and a midwife.
So an OBGYN is a physician who specializes in obstetrics and is trained in abnormal. They do surgery like cesarean sections, forceps deliveries, the complicated things. They may also care for healthy, low-risk people who are pregnant. A midwife really is an expert in normal birth, specializes in caring for people who are low risk, and we do all the same kind of clinical components of care for that low-risk person that an OB would do. We're going to see you for your prenatal care, order all the tests and, lab work, etc., that may be required, attend you during labor and birth, and care for you postpartum.
I had both a midwife and a doula. I loved the experience, but I don't think a lot of people know the difference between a midwife and a doula and why you might need both.
Yes, and they're very commonly equated, which, to be frank, is frustrating for us because doulas play a very important role. We know they're very beneficial in labor, helping people cope with labor, helping people get through labor, being there as a support person and an advocate. The midwife really is your clinical care provider, your primary caregiver. So some people do find that having both is helpful, to have that person who's focused just on your coping needs.
Like I said, I loved my experience with my midwife. I couldn't believe the amount of care, both leading up to, during my delivery, and as well, look at that. And then also, what I was most surprised was the aftercare. And quite frankly, I don't think I would have been as successful with breastfeeding had it not been for the fact that my midwife was coming to my house, doing house visits and cheering me on and weighing my baby and helping me out with techniques, because at that point, I didn't want to leave the house. So talk about the aftercare and what midwives provide.
Yeah, because I think the postpartum care in particular is very difficult to get that quality of care elsewhere in the healthcare system. We just happen to be the practitioners who are funded to provide that type of care. So we're going to see you in the postpartum first week, maybe 3 times in your home, maybe more if you're having troubles. A lot of our clients, if they have their babies in the hospital, will go home within just a few hours because they know the midwife's going to come to them. So they have their own bed, their own food, their own bathroom, but someone on call 24/7 if they have any problems who's going to come and help them. So we're there with you, your body, your baby, really figuring out what are the obstacles here and how can we help you solve those. Additionally, you and the baby are in our care for 6 weeks in total. So we're also seeing you in the clinic at 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and 6 weeks. So it's a very comprehensive package.
Yeah, before, during, and after. What are some common misconceptions about midwifery and midwives?
I'm really glad you asked that question because we're almost 25 years into regulated midwifery here in Canada, and we're still facing the same 3 or 4 myths. Number one, if you have a midwife, you can't have your baby in the hospital. Completely false. The vast majority of clients who have their babies with midwives are having them in the hospital. Of course, we also attend home births and births in birthing centers where those are available, but most midwifery clients do choose to go to the hospital. You may be able to labor at home a little bit longer and then go into the hospital later and leave earlier, but many people are choosing hospital birth. Number 2, I would say, is that you have to pay. And this persists in spite of the fact that we now have midwifery regulated and funded in almost all provinces and territories in Canada. There's a few small locations, Yukon, PEI, and Newfoundland is right in the middle of regulation, where they don't have it up and running yet. Everywhere else, midwifery is available, and it's paid for by provincial health care. The third one I would mention would be, if you have a midwife, you can't have an epidural. This is also untrue. Midwives, although we're specialists in supporting people who want to have a natural birth, you have access to all the same technology that everybody has access to. So of course, if you choose that, you have access to that technology most of the time under midwifery care. And then I would say there is one that persists too around safety and training, and this kind of idea that midwives aren't as safe as a physician. We know very clearly from research that the outcomes in midwifery care are excellent. And midwives themselves, you know, they're trained with a 4-year health sciences degree, and they're keeping up all the time on the latest research. So we had a study come out a couple weeks ago showing that vitamin D deficiency might be contributing to recurrent pregnancy loss. Midwives are going to be reading that, they're going to be integrating that into their practice. What's the latest research on the safety of out-of-hospital birth? We have to keep up on all those things as well, so.
So who do you think is the best candidate, if that's even a fair question, the best candidate to choose a midwife?
Well, I think it's probably most useful for people who really want to be involved in decisions about their care. We have a very profound informed choice kind of process where you're really involved in making plans about how your care is going to unfold. People who want a natural birth, as I mentioned before, of course we don't restrict ourselves to that, but if reduced intervention is something you are interested in, the best place for you in the healthcare system is with a midwife who specializes in that kind of care. That postpartum care, someone who maybe doesn't have as much family support, or they don't have experience in their family with breastfeeding or newborns. I think, you know, of course, it's great for everybody, but those are some groups of people who might really want to get on a midwife's list.
I had an emergency C-section. It was not something that I was hoping for, certainly, and it really did seem like an emergency in that moment. So talk to me about how, when in an emergency situation, perhaps this is part of debunking some of those myths, how that would have potentially played out if I didn't have an OBGYN and instead had a midwife.
Well, very likely, without knowing all the details, it would have played out in exactly the same way. So your midwife would be monitoring the baby's heart rate just the way your nurse would have been in cooperation with the OB. If we detect something that sounds a bit awry, we're going to put on the fetal monitor. And if we see something that's a bit concerning, we try all our tricks that we know to fix it. If it's not getting fixed, we let the OB know who's on call. We might put our heads together for a little while and go, oh, try this. Oh, let's watch it for this long. Let's so and so. But if it gets to the point where this baby has to come out right now, the baby comes out right now. We just say, oh, yeah, we got to go cesarean section, and they roll you down the hall in the same way. Your midwife is by your side, giving you information, still there, and that advocacy, information, support role is responsible for the baby as soon as it's born, but obviously in collaboration with that team that took care of you in that circumstance that you had. If you're in an out-of-hospital setting, it's actually quite similar. We're monitoring things. If they're going a little bit off the rails, we're like, oh, we better go into the hospital now, continuing to monitor. Maybe we have time to go by car if it's not an emergency. If we're worried about time, we'll go by ambulance. We call the hospital so they know we're coming. They're there to receive us when we get there. And the same kind of process. You're getting down there with the OB in consultation right when you need to be.
Katrina, thank you so much, and keep doing what you do with your team.